This is Pace Per Mile with host Chris Nicholas. Take us on your next run or ride and prepare for race day with Pace Per Mile.
Welcome to Pace Per Mile. I'm Chris Nicholas. We have our training segment this week on the show and a new individual to the program, Jake Maulin.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Jake, you are a trainer averaging a few new clients a week, and we want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself as we dive into a training segment here on Pace Per Mile. And this week, we're going to be talking about resolutions. Everybody's packing it in at the gym, and I know it starts to fizzle around March, but hopefully in our conversation today that we can talk about some resolutions that people can have last throughout the year. So we're going to talk a little bit about that here in a couple of minutes. But first, Jake, welcome to Pace Per Mile. Each week we're going to be talking with you, sharing some knowledge, and really getting into some facts, some ways that people can train better to become a better runner, a better triathlete, those individuals that are looking for that little extra knowledge that you deal with your clients every day, right?
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, it's an honor and a privilege, and I'm fired up to be here. I was born in Rolla, Missouri, and if you know where that is, God bless you. We moved to St. Louis when I was 3 years old. From there, I went to school at the University of Missouri. I was an athlete my whole life. My father's actually in the Missouri Football Hall of Fame, so most of the football games I watched as a kid were in slow motion and rewind. We would watch a lot of game film, and I would say that I grew up in the locker room, really heard a lot of halftime pep talks, and really there was a lot to be said for that because it fueled my own early days as an athlete. But that being said, I went away to college, and I played a little bit of college golf and wound up throwing myself into the work world. And with that sort of, corporate edge, the physical fitness aspect of it kind of got thrown to the wayside. And I started to gain weight. I was less active. I lost mobility, and I couldn't figure out what was missing because I'm thinking to myself, doing well, I got a good job, I got a good apartment, I got a good, life, everything's rolling, but I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And really one day, I was having a really, really bad day, and I was kind of sitting in my living room, and I was alone, and I decided to go for a run. It wasn't pretty. I ran down to the end of the street, and kind of like Forrest Gump, I said, well, might as well keep going. And I continued to do that. By the time I got back to my apartment, just for fun, this is before I knew about all the programs for tracking your run. Went on Google Maps, I mapped it out, and it was a little over 9 miles. And my first thought was, 9 miles? Boy, I bet I could run a marathon. And that following April, I ran my first marathon. I kind of started to tailor my lifestyle towards running. I sort of jumped right into the marathon thing, but once I'd sort of accomplished that, then I started wanting more out of my body. So I started to, lift weights. I started to ride the bike. I started going on swims. People start telling me about Ironman competition. They start talking triathlons. I become interested in this stuff. And then I sort of turned into an endurance sports junkie. I'd say about 4 years ago, something changed in my life. And I'd realized what this fitness thing had done for me. I was getting a lot out of it. And a guy, much wiser than myself, told me that the secret to life is anytime you get a hold of something good, if you want to keep it, you got to give it away. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to offer these services to other people. I started small. I wasn't charging anything, and I would take people on runs. And then, little by little, I said, boy, I bet I could become a personal trainer. I didn't have all the answers, and I still don't have all the answers, but you don't need to. A good lawyer friend of mine always says, don't let perfect get in the way of good. If you have a good thing, grow it, and it'll become great. And then at the same time, don't let great be the enemy of good. So continue to grow it and continue to do more and more with it. So I got some certifications with the National Strength and Conditioning Association and the National Academy of Sports Medicine. I quit my corporate job. I became a personal trainer for a large gym corporation. I worked for them for a little over a year. And then I found a studio space here in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and I opened in October. And I continue to share this message of happy and healthy living with all those who will listen. My primary purpose is to make health and fitness accessible and available to everyone. And I do everything I can to see through it that happens. I find that when I put people in responsibility for their own fitness programs, simply by suggesting that they show up on a regular basis, they do, and they take ownership and they take a lot of pride in what they do. I believe that if you want to grow esteem, you must do so by practicing esteemable acts. And I find that fitness is a wonderful arena to do that. So I'm very blessed and lucky to be doing what I'm doing. And like I said before, it's an honor to be on the show. And I look forward to doing this with you all year long because I want to spread the message of health and fitness to all. I was talking with some of my clients just this morning about resolutions and keeping them and what that looks like. As you and I often talk, I'm a runner first and a triathlete second, but the two absolutely fuel each other. And one thing that we sort of agreed on with the clients that I spoke to was it's good to have long-term, big-time goals, and you can set deadlines, say, in the summertime. And then what you do is you take those goals and you underline those goals and you say, what can we do today to make that attainable in June?
With most of the country being frigid and cold, we're dealing with goals that are put off to that summertime. We're not really thinking about goals right now, even though we want to get in the gym and we want to try to get as many miles in as possible. But sometimes we're talking about 0-degree days or 17-degree days, or what you're dealing with on the Northeast, blizzards that are coming in. And so those goals are kind of pushed off, as you said, into the spring and summer, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's sort of what you can do. So like just for a point-specific example, if somebody says, I want to run a half marathon by summertime, and I say, well, do you run? And they're like, no, that's why I'm here. And then I'll say, okay, well, what can we do to make that happen today? And there's a lot of exercises you can do inside. You wouldn't even associate them with running. All manners of strength start from the core out. And I think what a lot of people get confused on is when they think core, they think six-pack abs or stomach muscles. And to be quite honest with you, we talked a little bit about my background. My core, or my vision of the core, is everything from between the neck and the knees. So it's those quadricep muscles, those glute muscles, those hamstring muscles, everything in the abdomen and the obliques and back muscles. And those major muscle groups make up what it is the core really is. So we focus on doing exercises in the studio that activate, build, and create a stable core for you to move forward. And then that way, when springtime comes and you're ready to go run, you're ready to go and you're a much better runner than you think.
Somebody comes into your studio or plans to go into the gym. They say, I'm going to run a half marathon this year. They might have a few 5Ks or 10Ks under their belt. Now it's half marathon training. And so in your opinion, it's developed the core even more then?
Yes, absolutely. Your core always needs conditioning. Any person who's a professional trainer will tell you there's really thousands of different movements and angles that you can take to build core strength. The old trick question at the National Academy of Sports Medicine is, how many sides does your core have? The answer is it has no sides because it is a cylinder. And when you start to think of that as sort of this multiplanular sort of movement, it always needs conditioning. And something that I often tell my clients is it's a lot easier to stay in shape than it is to get in shape. If you're already like halfway there, you feel like you're on your way, then that's wonderful. What we want to do is maintain and build off of that core strength, that sort of stabilizing mechanism, and then we can start to train the outer extremities that makes people better runners. And what we can do is a lot of exercises inside. A real good example would be like a forward lunge or a reverse lunge, different types of squats, whether they be medial squats or back squats or front squats. What you really want to try and focus on is activating the glute muscles. You really want to focus on keeping your calf muscles loose and limber. And you want to do a lot of indoor running drills, which are clinics that I typically do once a week that have to do with sort of a natural running form. And then once you've accomplished these things, as soon as the blizzards go away and everything thaws out, when you actually go out and hit the pavement, you're much more prepared than just like, all right, let's go for a run.
What's the biggest between moving from a 5K to a half marathon when we make that resolution?
I'm going to venture and say that it's time on your feet. This is, a lot of people, when they start to up the distance of the race, they think like, okay, well, I'm going to have to be able to run further. And so what they'll say is, okay, well, instead of running 3 miles today, I'm just going to up it to 7. Because that's what the book says I should do. And what I recommend is don't look at the miles. Look at the minutes on your feet. When we do these things, I really put a lot of value on, how long is it going to take you to run a half marathon? And we'll come up with a realistic number And, most people, it's somewhere around like that 2 hour and 15 or 2 hour mark. And we'll say, okay, so you're going to be running for 2 hours. So let's get you prepared to be on your feet at least for 2 hours.
Hmm.
And in those first introductory weeks, I tell people to run for 30 minutes. I don't care how far you go, just run for 30 minutes. And then we say run for 45 minutes. And then once you can do that, then we start adding on miles, because then you're actually ready, because it's a goal that's attainable. You can do something for 30 minutes. And when people get confused, like the question becomes then, oh, well, how far should I run for 30 minutes? I love when we just talked about, we're not going to talk about how far we're going to go, but that's the question that comes up next. And I say, listen, leave your front door, run for 15 minutes. As soon as your timer hits 15 minutes, turn around and head back to your front door. Because that's 15 out, 15 back, you're all set. And what you're doing there is you're building a base. And there is a science to it when you kind of go through we call it pace running, that sort of base level training. What you're doing is you're preparing your joints to take the strain and the stress that's going to occur over the course of a longer race than you're used to. So I would say that's probably the number one thing, is time on your feet.
All right, so we talked about one of the resolutions that you see often is somebody that was going from a smaller distance, 3 miles, 6 miles, to 13.1, or eventually to 26.2. And so we're talking about core, talking about more time on their feet. What other resolutions do you see this time of the year when it comes to that runner or triathlete?
People are like, well, I want to lose weight. And you have other people that say, well, I'm going to stop smoking. What we found is we kind of had a little round table. I had two of my clients that overlapped. So the three of us were sitting around and we were talking about it. And what we came up with is, whatever resolution that you go for, it's so many of our resolutions are based on taking something away, like losing weight or stopping smoking. And it's almost like you're deemed to fail, because anytime you remove something from your life, even if it's something that you have a negative connotation with, all you're doing is creating a void. So instead of the resolution being to remove something, let's try and make the resolution to bring something in. So whether it be, I'm going to run for 30 minutes like we'd already talked about, or I'm going to cycle for a certain amount of time. So make the resolution to add something. One of my resolutions this year actually is, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the pistol squat out there, but I would like to master the unassisted pistol squat. It's bringing something into my life. And sort of the example that I can use, about 5 years ago when I started getting serious about running, I was a smoker. I didn't say, I'm going to quit smoking and start running. I just started running. And about 3 months into my running, coughing and hacking at the lung when I'm out there, it occurred to me, well, I bet I could run better if I stopped smoking. And believe it or not, that's how I stopped smoking, because the feeling was better running than I got from the cigarettes. And I love this one. People say this to me all the time. I wish I could run like you, but I don't have the runner's build. And I'm like, hey, 5 years ago, I weighed 225 pounds, which is big for my frame. I didn't have a runner's body. I got a runner's body by running. It's one of those things where I find that if you take a resolution, like if your resolution is to lose weight, maybe take that resolution and flip it around on itself and say, my resolution is to run more, and forget about it. Because I find that right action leads to right thinking. You can't think yourself out of this stuff. You have to take the action to move forward with it.
What about that individual that's maybe struggling right out of the gate? That first couple of weeks, just got a free gym membership or is picking up their miles, but they're struggling. What do you tell them?
First and foremost, and I guess a shameless plug, get a personal trainer. It is a little bit more money, but let me take that back. Get a good personal trainer. There is a difference. I find that good personal trainers serve as two purposes. One is to motivate and accelerate the person, and the other one is to dial them back and bring them in. Most people that come in and they just got that free gym membership and they're all fired up and they're ready to go, new year, new you, they're pumped. And they come in and they're like out of the gate, they're like, all right, I'm going to go run 5 miles. And they do it and they run 5 miles. And then they don't run again for like 5 days because their legs are toast because they haven't been running 5 miles. They go that one day and then that's it. And then it's so easy to slide right off. So what I tell those people is like, listen, get on a good twice a week, 3 times a week deal, take your rest days. And for about the first 5 weeks of this thing, we're going to take it nice and easy. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not walking people around, Frog's Pond. We are going to put stress on the body because that's very, very important to do. but we're going to do it in a very controlled way. So back to the original example, don't go run 5 miles, run 1 mile, and then do a couple of shuttle runs, and then do some agility work, and then maybe do some resistant training with supervision. And then, do that on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And before you know it, it's going to be March, and then you're going to say, okay, guess what? I have good news. We're going to progress you. We're going to progress you to running more miles or longer times or more weight. And if you get a good trainer that understands these things, they're going to really direct you there. And the last thing I'll say about it is I like a trainer that lives their brand. And I'm not just saying that because I live my brand, but like trainers that are also athletes really help the process because they understand the physical strain that goes into each of the exercises that they're doing.
I think we're always looking for new information or more information. What about that area where we kind of get discouraged because maybe that friend or that coach or the trainer just better than us when it comes to running faster or the agility? Is that discouraging when it comes to resolutions and this time of the year too?
It can be. And this is where you need to use your own discretion. And this is also why I would prefer, and the advice I would give to our listeners is to get a professional. When I say professional, I mean, yes, paid for sessions, because I find that people that get workout buddies, everybody's different. And yes, it's good to have, a competitive workout partner. But you're right. What if this person's starting to blow you out of the water? Then where does that leave you? Discouraged and alone. Whereas I'm faster and can run further than most of my clients, but I'm not there for me. And I have really good conception of my primary purpose is to excel your fitness level and to help you obtain your goals. So I'm going to stay right on that level. And when I think you need to be bumped up a little bit, I'm going to bump you up. And when I think we need to dial it down, then we'll dial it down. I understand what you're saying about that, but I changed what I had originally said from a personal trainer to a good trainer. A good trainer is going to identify those things, and a good trainer is going to keep you right on track, because we do live in a world where it's riddled with fear and a big fear of failure, and nobody wants to be left behind. And if you get a good professional person in there with you, you're going to be guided towards the star, the goal, the trophy, and they'll get you there.
We're talking with Jake Maulin here on Pace Per Mile. Jake is with Try Jake Fitness. Sounds like you are a great key to the program, and we're honored to have you as part of the Pace Per Mile team. And of course, we'll have some callers for some questions for you so that you can help with their training, so maybe they can cross that first half marathon coming up this year, or maybe it's their first 5K. All you have to do, right, is set your mind to it.
That's right, and show up. I had a woman, just for a quick story, she comes in the other day and she just looked grumpy. I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I just don't feel like being here." I'm like, "Well, you're already here, so that's happened. Why don't you just go lay down on the mat? We'll just start with 3 sets of naps." And she kind of laughed. I would say she was laying down for about 45 seconds. And she goes, "All right, I can't take it anymore. I get your point. Let's go." And we had an awesome hour. Like, it was a great workout. So I would say definitely taking the action by showing up is where it all starts.
Hey, Jake, how can people get a hold of you?
Oh, you can go to my website at tryjake.com. And my email address is jake@tryjake.com. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube.
All right. Until next week, have a great week. Thanks for joining us this week on Pace Per Mile, and we will chat with you next week. I'm Chris Nicholas. This has been a segment on training on Pace Per Mile.
Thanks for listening to this week's Pace Per Mile show. For more on the latest news, reviews, and more, check out pacepermile.com. Like us on Facebook and join in the conversation on Twitter. Until next week, keep putting in the miles and keep your goals high.